okay, what we have been doing is taking all the big corporations, the big Chinese corporations around the world, that they have been before the Belt Road Initiative, but that they have spread all their investments around the world. And we have done, last year, we made these Chinese investments in Africa. And now in this this year, we're working with Latin American corporations. So what do we want to know? More that see where they are investing. The thing is that we want to know who are the holders or the institutional investors that are inside of these Chinese companies. This is very important because in the disputing of China and USA, what we have seen is that most of the mutual funds or the hedge funds are investing in these great companies. So maybe a few weeks ago, I think it was early August, there was a meeting in the House of Representatives in of the government of USA, and they were two deputies. They said that BlackRock and MSCI were investing. They have their shares in these big companies who are financing the liberalization, the liberalization armed forms of China. So we have to understand that there is a dispute between China and USA, but at the same time, it is very interesting how these Chinese corporations are already in the backyard of Latin America. As you know, there's many years ago, since the 19th century, there's a president, I just forget the name, that says it's America for Americans. So we are part of USA, and that's how they saw. The problem is that most of the investment of the US direct investment especially in USA, have been declining since the Cold War finished. So I am going just to put some in the paper. It's also the methodology how do we choose these companies, and also how we, and this information is in a database of the Center of Globalization, that it is in BU in Boston University. So let me try it. So I use that term hot finance because that's why I said that so is the title that I decided at the end is Hot Finance, Institutional and Fund Investors in Chinese Corporates, because hot finance is the term that Polanyi in the book of The Great Transformation, he used to show how the hot finance between the end of the 19th century and the 20th century, especially the hot finance, were the ones to be in charge of all the public policies. And also they were very related, not only with the governments, but also in that time with the Central Bank of England. So hot finance, it is, and also this hot finance, I relate with a Chinese cycle. So hot finance, and it is in the, I'm going to read, is an institution sui generis, and it is peculiar to the last third of the 19th and the first part of the 20th century, and its function as the main link between the political and economic organization of the world. It supplied the instruments for an international peace system, which was worked with the help of the powers, but with the powers themselves could neither have established nor maintained. While the concert of Europe acted only at intervals, hot finance functioned as a permanent agency of the most elastic kind. Independent of single governments, even of the most powerful, it was in touch with all, independent of the central banks, even of the Bank of England. It was closely connected with them. There was intermediate contact between finance and diplomacy. Neither would consider any long-range plan, whether peaceful or warlike, without making sure of the other's goodwill. Yet the secret of the successful maintenance of general policy lay undoubtedly in the position, organization, and techniques of international finance. Well, so the objective of this paper, as I told you, is especially only to analyze the 10 largest Chinese state-owned corporations in Latin America, whose main characteristics to be global, also to study their investment by country and sector, and also to maintain institutional investors that participate as shareholders in this corporation. So the central hypothesis in this paper is the categories of big government and big bank of the Republic Bank of China, and especially the Hyman Minsky categories that he used to understand how the power of the government is especially in the big bank, in the central bank, and the central bank as creative of employment. So let's. I'm going to. I divided the different Chinese cycle. The first one is from the economic and financial reforms during the 80s in China until the great financial crisis. The second is how China faced the recession and the deflation at the global level, and the approach of the Belt Road Initiative. And finally, after the pandemic, the post-pandemic and war implies a different alternative in the economic and geopolitical environment in relation to Latin America. So which are the categories that we can use is the definition of financial capital of Hilferding, also money manager capitalism of Robert Goodman, but also and the big bank and big government of Hyman Minsky. So what is the role of the investors and mutual funds play on China's global corporation, and why BlackRock and MSCI investment in Chinese corporation are being pressured by US Representative House, and how the institutional investors prioritize their investment in China's large corporation. So here I have a table. I'm going to pass it very, very quickly, because even to see, we have to see, for example, I'd like to take this one. These are the Chinese construction corporations in Latin America. And you see, for example, I'm just going to take some names. For example, power construction corporations, they have investment between 2020 and 2022, more than $9,000 $10 million. They are in Cuba, in Jamaica, in Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Ecuador, Mexico. The Chinese communication construction, they all are around, especially most of these companies, the most investment is in South America, especially in Brazil and in Argentina. This is the China National Machinery Industry, China Energy Engineering, China International Trust and Investment, China Railway Construction. And for example, China Railway Construction, we made the map of this corporation around the world, and they have a lot of investment in Africa, also inside of, for example, in Moscow. It's very interesting. They are making one of the biggest train inside Moscow, and also, for example, in the Southeast Asia. So all these global Chinese corporations are very important, but they have a specific objective to be in those countries. So let me continue. Then this is the principal sectors. Where do they invest? And let's see this one, which is the synthesis. For example, in energy, in minerals, transportation, agriculture, real estate, health, tourism, other. These are, the information is from this database, but especially they are in energy and metals. So in the next one, this is by countries. So we, how to say, the chart, now we do it in another form. We put here, for example, look how Brazil, the investment that they have. For example, China Petroleum and Chemical, this is IIPPE. They have in Brazil, these are the amounts of millions of dollars that they can invest. And this is the number of assets of this company that are in this, especially in this in Brazil, or in Chile, or in Peru. So for example, Aluminum Corporation of China, Chinalco, it's metals, they have in Peru, for example, Chengdu Tianqi, metals. And I'm going to pass more. Let me go more. Then we have, they are divided between Chinese construction corporations and Chinese investment corporations. But let's go because I want to show. Then here are the mutual funds. And this is very interesting because if you see, for example, Vanguard is one of the most important hedge funds in USA. They have different companies, but for example, you have the Vanguard Emerging Market Stocks, the Vanguard Total International Stocks. So they are divided. And they have at the same time the different, where they are, in which companies they are. So this is, I think this is very interesting because from this, we can have the hypothesis that there is a high degree of financialization in the Chinese corporations. So let's go. And let's see, I don't know if I have here, there's a lot of information, but for example, BlackRock, you know that it is one of the most important hedge funds around the world. It has around, I think it's $9 trillion. It's incredible because it's a merger of different funds, but now it is the first one. And BlackRock is in most of the Chinese corporations. Okay. But I want to go because I want to show another thing. So this is, we're continuing. They are so big. For example, this one, you see, BlackRock is in Aluminum Corporation of China, China National Petroleum, the 3 Years Renewable Group, China Petroleum and Chemical Corporation, China State Construction Engineering, China International Trust and Investment, and these are other funds. And this is now here, for example, in Latin America, how much are they, the total amount in the world, for example, and then the investment they have at only in Latin America, they have 13%. This is in investment and this is in construction. It is divided. And the shares that they have in the company is 589% in Latin America. And if you can see, is everyone, for example, China Railway Construction, they had the total amount around the world is $80,000 billion. And then you can see how much do they have in Latin America and in the different corporations. That's China's, this is the mutual investors. But for example, the major, this is now by countries. This is, for example, China, China National Machinery Industry. They have in Argentina, no? In energy and also in Nicaragua. They have an aluminum corporation of China, Chinalco. It is only in Peru. No, but they are doing there. And this is Power Construction Corporation. They have in Argentina and in Jamaica, China Railway Construction. And then, for example, you have the project. China Railway Construction Corporation is in Chile. It's in the highway. They, by paying 600 million for the rights to toll and 169 kilometers stretch of the Route 5 between Chillán in the center of the country and the southern city of Kijipuli. So when you see these investments, so you have to ask, why are they? Why are they? For example, in Kenya, they have a train from Mombasa, which is a port of Kenya, to the center of Kenya. But most of those trains or railways, they all those go for specific minerals or specific things that they will go and they will be needed for the accumulation process of China. So this is Sinochem. This is in Brazil. It's incredible how the high amount of investment they have in Brazil. This is also in Argentina. This is China National Petroleum in Peru. So what they are doing there. So, and here is the description for the projects where they are. And for example, this is in Chile, Tianqi. In Brazil. This is in Argentina, no? The China Energy Engineering. And China Communication Construction. It's in Panama and in Peru. And well, China International Trust and Investment, for example, in Venezuela. And well, and Tres Gargantas, they have in Brazil, no? And here we have they are in the hydropower, and China Petroleum and Sinopec, which is very important, in Brazil. And Chinese construction engineering, but in Bahamas and in Argentina. And thank you, that's everything. So, it's a long, I would say, research project.
Yes, yes. You can see from your details of your project. Yes, I'd love to see the paper. Yes, Rafael. That means to change the platform.
We're taking photos, right?
Yes, I share with you later on.
I'd ask to take a photo. The microphone works from here. Can I speak from here?
I think it should be okay. It's very sensitive. So, and as long as you can hear that should be fine. If you, for any reasons, you don't hear properly, let us know. Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
That's great. Okay. When I go, you can do this so that the camera will follow you if you want to move to the other side. Because when I'm here, it just follows me back.
You have to run away from here. I want to put in the full screen, but it's Spanish.
What do you want to do?
To put full screen.
Is it not full screen already?
It's not full screen.
It's a PDF. Are you looking to do a PowerPoint?
Yeah.
It's a PDF file.
Yeah, we don't have to, because we don't have to. So maybe if you want to make it, just enlarge it like that.
Okay. No.
That doesn't work, so we need to use the mouse.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Rafael Silveira from Instituto Federal Santa Catarinense from Brazil. The work, as you can see on the screen, is called Geoeconomics Brazil-China Relations between 2012 and 2022. Was written by me and by Professor Carlos Spínola, which is not here, so I present. The main objective of this work was to analyze the investments that trade between China and Brazil in this period of time. And I take we took this specific period of time, which coincides with the arrival of Xi Jinping in the president of China, because there was a breaking point about the type of investments that China starts doing in Brazil in this decade. That's here. This objective I already told. First, I will do a small introduction, talking a little bit about Brazil and a little bit about China, and then I'll talk specific about investments and the trade between the two countries. Brazil is a very big country in Latin America and the biggest one in territorial extension with more than 8 million square kilometers. The GDP of Brazil last year was about $1.9 trillion, with growth of 2.9 in the compared with the year before. The GDP per capita of Brazil was almost $9,000 last year, and Brazil is also a full member of BRICS and Mercosur, and in both of these economic blocks, the country was one of the founders. To understand what's passing through Brazil this period of time, you have to come back a little bit in the time and talk about the economic scenario and the political scenario, because they are connected. In the political scenario, 10 years ago, the former president, Dilma Rousseff was the president, and she was elected for her first time in 2010, and was re-elected in 2014. And her second term faced a number of challenges because he lost the majority in the parliament and starts a process that would end with the coup against her government in 2016. And when she was removed from office, was through a parliamentary coup with the support of the commercial media, the bourgeoisie media, the parliament, of course. they did the so-called impeachment, which was in fact a coup, and the sectors of the judiciary, which starts persecution against her, and especially against the former and now current president Lula da Silva. Then Michel Temer, which was her vice president, take the power and inverted all the economic agenda from the years before, applying neoliberal, ultraliberal project since he was in the charge of the country. Between this time, there was the lawfare against former President Lula. He was put in prison or kidnapped, as I like to say, because when you put someone in prison without reason, it's not like a regular process. And he was a political prisoner and couldn't run for the president in 2018, which brings us to the election of Jair Bolsonaro, far-right politician, within the economy just deepening the ultraliberal project with a lot of the so-called reforms, which didn't reform anything. They were destroying the small welfare state of Brazil. And although besides the economic ultraliberal project, Bolsonaro's government also has a terrible management of the COVID pandemic. And in the last year or the last year and a half of his term, he was trying to stay in power without the election, especially when he saw that he could lost the election for President Lula, what at the end, which really happened. And then we arrived in 2023, when President Lula assumed his third term in January this year. The economic scenario of this period, the economic scenario of this period, they are very close with the political one. The first years of this period, also from 2012 to 2015. Brazil had a strong growing economic internal economics, driving especially because the high prices of the commodities. However, between 2014 and 2015, when it starts the process of the coup against the former President Dilma, there is the beginning of a slowdown to decline the prices of commodities. So we had a political problem together with an economic problem, which helped to that specific political group to take the power from the former President Dilma. There is a recession between 2015 and 2016, with severe recession, primarily because of the reduction of the prices of commodities. Then we arrived in the ultraliberal economic reforms that are as told in the screen before, led by short-term governments and followed by Bolsonaro's, including pension and labor reforms. And this period, we also have low public investments in the economy. Brazil, in general economic terms, is a major export of commodities like soybeans, iron, and oil. The global demand for these three commodities has always influenced Brazil's economic performance in the last 3 decades, with the fluctuations in prices affecting the internal economic conjuncture, higher or down, depending on the global prices of these products. And Brazil, in this period, has also struggled with high inflation and fiscal deficits, especially for between 2015 and 2018. Then, let me take some more. Here, talk a little bit about China before arriving on the comparing the trade between the both countries and the investments of China and Brazil. China is the constitutional organization of China has its origin in the victory of 1949 revolution under the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. Through the reforms from the 70s, 80s on, Chinese was introduced the millenary mercantile characteristic of Chinese culture and promotion institutional innovations. The country becomes to a new cycle of economic development that is still ongoing and bring China to this current situation of a major economic power in the world, with the ability to influence countries all around the world in practically all continents of the world. As a result, the last 4 decades, Chinese has a strongly amazing average growth of GDP that in this period for more than 9% per year, and the GDP per capita passed from $250 in the 80s to more than $12,000 last year. China has reached, in absolute terms, the position of the second biggest economy in the world, and when you're using the PPP, it's already surpassed the US and it's the first economy in the world. Now we arrive where is the main objective of this work, which is analyze the geoeconomic relations between both countries. In this map, you can see Chinese investments in South America last year in 2022. Brazil, it's important is the name. Sorry for that. Now that I check it, Brazil has almost 50% of the Chinese investments in South America, which is not something strange to understand because the GDP of Brazil is more than half of the South America. So last year was about 51% or so. So it's normal that Brazil received more investments than his neighbors because of the size of his economy. Continue here. Since 2012, there are changes in the sector objectives of investments of China in Brazil, as well as in the profile of the imported and exported products due Chinese state-owned planning policies. The decades before, they were more concentrated in commodities, in agriculture, mineration, etc. And from the 10 or 11 years, from in the last 10 or 11 years, they changed from industrial sector mainly. Out of the total between 2012 and 2022 in Brazil, 37% of the investments were directed through electric energy sector, and mainly through the giant state grid and through Georges, as we already saw in the first presentation here. They are talking with themselves. Secondly, the manufacturing industry accounted for 23% of the number of the investments in this period, especially in automotive sector, which is it's more than half, 51% of the total. And I didn't put in the presentation, but in the last 3 or 4 years, most of this automotive product segment is in the electric cars. They are starting to the investments in the electric cars. And also, for what you're saying about the electric energy sector, they are mainly in green energy, hydroelectric, solar energy, wind energy. So, especially in the last 5 years, these investments, the 37% in the electric sector and the half of the 23% in the industry, they can be considered as a green investments. That's the same general terms. After the automotive production with 18%, areas of manufacturing electro machines, devices and materials, and the computer and electronic equipment production segment accounted for 7% in the industrial manufacturing. In third position, in the investments, we have the information technology sector with 13%. Next, with a share of 6%, comes agriculture and related service, which in 10 or 15 years earlier was more than half. Then today they are only in the medium now of this 10 years, they are only 6%. The oil extraction segment and financial services absorb each 5% each one. The other categories include segments with individual shares of less than 4%, like infrastructure works, telecommunications, extraction of metallic minerals, and other minor activities. In the region, in Brazil, there are 16 central Chinese state-owned enterprises with active investments. These central SOEs account for approximately 8% of the value of Chinese investment stock in Brazil in this period.
What are the absolute amounts? Or how much the China invests in?
I have after this number. Here's a graph with these numbers that I just showed for you in the electric sector first, and then manufacturing industry, information technology, and the others areas. Regarding the bilateral trade between Brazil and China, they have been increasing since the beginning of the 21st century, but more intensely from 2010s onwards. In 2003, I'm coming back a little bit in the time, when China had just joined the WTO, and in Brazil, Lula da Silva was taking his first term as president. China was an economic partner of medium importance to Brazil. That year, the exports to China reached approximately for 44.5 billion, and was only 6% of the exports of Brazil, far behind from the US. That period was the main destination of Brazil's sales that year with 14 billions, which was 14% also. In the same year, imports were approximately for 2.1 billion, representing only 4.3% of the purchases. I'm showing this data from 20 years ago, just to have a big page about how it grew from this period. It's important also to mention that in 2005, China overtook Germany as Brazil's second largest trading partner. In 2010, after the capitalism crisis of 2008-2009, China exports would reach 30 billion, representing 15% of the sales. And in this year, for the first time, surpassed US as the main destination of Brazil goods. In the same year, China also overtake the US as the bloc main supplier, reaching the sum of 20 billion sold to Brazil, which represented 11% of the total that year. From this point onwards, China has consolidated its position as the first destination and supplier of Brazil in the trade, year after year, with some variation in the numbers, but always keeping itself as the first one, very far from US in the second, as you can show here. Main export destination of Brazil last year, first is China with $90 billion, which represents more than 27% of the exports. Second, European Union, which of course is not a country. I put some countries and some blocks here, but I think it's important to put this way, with $50 billion or 15%. Then US in third with $37 billion, 11%. Mercosur with Argentina inside with 6.5%, and only Argentina with 4.6%. The exports is also the same countries and blocks, but there is an inversion between US and European Union in the second and third position. China first with 22% of the importing of Brazil, US with 18%, European Union 16%, Mercosur 6.8%, and Argentina 4.8%. Here, the bilateral trade between Brazil and China in this period from 2012 until last year, we can see the exports more than double for $41 billion to almost $9 billion that year. And imports also has a big growing, not almost double, from 34 to $60 billion. And there's the balance, always with surplus in the favor of Brazil. But especially after 2016, this surplus has grown a lot because in the first 4 years, between 2012 and 2015, there were variations, some year of growth, some year not growing. But from that point on until 2021 here, they were growing. And this last year, there is a decrease, especially because the products that Brazil sells to China starts doing for itself or buying for another countries. And of course, this is not a Chinese problem; it's a Brazilian problem. Brazil who has to resolve this problem, especially because what Brazil is selling to China, which I will show in the next screen. I believe in the next or the other before. Based on this 2022 data, Brazil was only the 10th largest supplier to China, obtaining around 4.8% of Chinese market. The same year, Brazil was the 20th buyer with 1.8% of the total trade. So we can see that it's while China is very, very important to Brazil trade, Brazil is not so important to Chinese trade. China is the first importer and the first exporter to and from Brazil. And Brazil is only the 10th or the 20th for China. So Brazil is more depending on China than China from Brazil. And as I said, this is not a Chinese problem, it's a Brazilian problem. That's here, Brazil is there, and 1.8% of the destinations of Chinese goods last year, far behind from US, Hong Kong, Japan, other Asian and European countries as Vietnam, India, Germany, Netherlands, etc. Yeah, okay, thank you. Trying to run here. Sorry, this is in Portuguese. This is what does Brazil import from China? In the first column there with 11, 8%, 6.8%, mostly industrial products and chemical industry. So Brazil is imported from China industrial goods in general terms. In the other hand, what does Brazil export to China? In the middle here is soybean, there in the corner with 20% iron, with 18% crude and oil, and 9% here meat. So Brazil exporting especially commodities, primary sector. That's why we have this problem of the decreasing of the exports to China last year. Here the presentation of total exports from Brazil to China year after year in this period, almost always growing, with the exception there in 2014, 2015, when there is the economic recession in Brazil, and last year with these reasons that I just told you. Finally, to finalize my talking here, I tried to synthesize Chinese investments in Brazil are growing and consistent in this analyzed period, and that from the Belt and Road Initiative, a new window of opportunity opens for productive partnership between both countries. Regarding the analysis of trade, China has gradually increased its participation in negotiations with Brazil, and has definitely supplanted the US as the main partnership. It's important to point that the deepening of the partnership, the economic partnership, prevented even a reactionary government and Bolsonaro from not being able to go much behind rhetoric in these relations with China. He was always talking nonsense things about China, but it keeps only in the talking, because the economic investments of powerful groups imposing themselves in the face of his anti-communist discourse. Finally, it's necessary to point that Brazil is more dependent on China in economic terms than China is from Brazil, as you can see in the numbers of position of the trading between them, especially which one buys from the other one. And that's all. Sorry if I speak too fast in the end. Thank you. And I didn't answer your question, but I have the answer. Sorry.
Okay, Anna is joining us from Brazil, so she'll get up 4 a.m. in the morning just to attend this one. So she really deserves another round of applause, I think. Anna, well done. So over to you when you're ready, okay? You haven't unmuted yourself. Please unmute yourself. Yeah.
I think I could.
Yeah, that's fine. We can hear you perfect. Yes.
Great. So very nice to be here. I thank you for the organizer that could make it happen, you know, even being so early in the morning here in Brazil. It's almost 5 in the morning, 5 a.m. But it's a great pleasure to be here. And Olivia and Fernanda and I were really wondering if you could participate of this discussion on China from this very interesting seminar. So this is an ongoing research that we are doing on CBDC in general. But when we started our research on CBDC, we realized that thinking about CBDC in general is quite difficult. So we should go further to discuss the specificities, the design of a type of system. And so we choose the Chinese financial system for its importance, and also mainly because the CBDC process in China is quite developed. So that's a work we've been doing that. Olivia Matos, me, Ana Rosa, and Fernanda Ultremari. So the outline of our paper is first that theoretical part, and then a broader discussion on the central bank digital currencies, and then we go a little further on the discussion of China. Our main hypothesis, sorry, I just didn't put the time. Our main hypothesis is that, in general, when you take into account the introduction of CBDC, just to show you before our hypothesis, this is a map of the different countries that are doing at some level, at some point, the discussion or development or pilot pilot process of CBDC, of digital currencies. And then what we see today is more than 130 countries are doing that all over the country. And what we see that's from this, having just beside the very small countries, the country that's really going further on this is China. So that's our object. So in general, for CBDC, the hypothesis of our research is that creating a CBDC is much more a response of central banks to the development of the private monies or the private speculative assets that's called crypto assets. But so in general is this, the movement of central banks in order to face this private movement in order to keep all the control, the sovereignty of the money. But in China that happens, that's a little, its specificities. As in China, we've been seeing in the last decade, or a little more than a decade, a very important development of private platforms from these Chinese big techs. So what our hypothesis is that in China, this very, very important development of digital currency is a response to this movement of this importance of these private platforms. So I think we can show it. So as we have seen on this map, there is a very important the idea of CBDC is growing in importance, and even if just on the discussion level, but it's really going further in all levels: academics, policymakers, and the players. And what we realized and motivated at first our research is that a CBDC or creating a digital money is much more than the idea of a way of substituting the physical money, the coins, the paper money. It's much more than that. Because depending on the design of the CBDC, you can have a whole different financial system, a whole different from what we've been knowing as a financial system in the last century. So it's a very big move. It can be a very big move. And so it leads to a lot of worries in different levels. And so, but what we have seen, I'm going to give you a spoiler right now. What we've been seeing is that the different countries that has already gone in a further way on developing their CBDC are keeping the system as closer than to what we know now or from what it could be. So our point of our departing point. So to make this analysis on CBDC that can really affect how monetary policy is done, how the financial system work, how the international money is organized. We have decided our departing point was our worries were about the banking system, as we understand that the banking system, the financial system as a whole, and the banking system are in the heart of any capitalist economy. And they have this very important role that's finance, business, and new investments. And also banks are in the business of creating money through credit. And what we have seen in all the worries about people, or the vast majority, the worries about people on the effects of CBDC were the effects on bank intermediation. But our departing point is that banks are more than intermediators, they are creators of money. So a very different environment or structure for the system can make it quite different. And our worries were about credit. So that's how our introduction is state money, bank money, and year monies. And what we see here, so here from this CBDC are important, are international, are a global movement from domestic central banks. And also our departing point, theoretical departing point is that credit is the banking systems is quite important because they are central to the credit, to the business, to the real economy. So now we are going to start getting close to the Chinese financial system. When you look at the Chinese financial system, we see a system where the banks, especially mainly the banks, but today not only, but mainly the banks have a quite important role as in other economies, but it's quite more important in China. We can take that from the relation from GDP to non-financial corporations. You see, we see here that I don't know if you can see that this line here shows us the credit to GDP from depository institutions in China, and we see a very increasing role, and then today it gets to close to 2,000% of GDP. So that's quite important. And then having that in mind, the importance of credit, depository credit in China. If we look a little further, a little closer, we see that even knowing that the capital markets in China are more important now, they have still they rely on the banking laws, as we can see here when we compare to other countries as Japan, United States, and even the Euro area. So in China, the role played by the banking loans to finance the non-financial system, the non-financial corporate sector, is more than 50%. So we are just approaching how important is the banking system and the banking credit for how China economy works. So now going to a more general worries about or questions that one can pose from this movement of creation of CBDC. CBDC can have different types of design. Will it be wholesale or retail? What's the form, direct, hybrid, or synthetic? Will be how anonymity is going to be faced. So we have different questions, and then just for the time, I'm going to the Chinese financial system. Also, before that, we can have different types of motivation, and one can see that in general, the motivations that we see closer when we look at the defense of the creation of digital money is that it will get to a bigger efficiency in payments. It will have a financial. It will lead to financial inclusion. But we think that's, especially when we have in mind the higher income countries and China also, these are not the very important motivations. As you have already said, our comprehension of the motivation is the way of facing a movement of the creation of private money, and in China a little different from the private platforms. So when we look at going to China right now, when we look at this process in China, and it's really a long-term process. They start in discussing the creation of a digital currency almost a decade ago. So what we see here, they started thinking and reflecting and organizing the creation of the system. So from 2014, when they started, to 2020, when the pilot experiences were launched, so there's a lot of work. So we can say that they are far away from other countries on this way, even the US and even the European system. So going to what we already know, the People's Central Bank of China, they have already published how it's working. It's really already on this pilot experiences. Right now, more than 25 cities in China has already some type of using of this digital currency. And it means more than 260 million accounts, wallets of digital currency is already going there. So we have a process there. So what's the design of the CBDC in order to think about our main question is how it can or how it will affect the banking system. It's a central bank liability. It will be a substitution to M0. It's a two-tie hybrid system. The Chinese central bank has decided to keep this two tiers system as we know now from physical money. So you have central banks to banks, and then banks to the non-financial economy, to the non-financial actors, and the CBDC is a liability of central banks. But as we will see, commercial banks they have a quite important role on this process. Regarding the use and purpose, you have two kinds of CBDC. First, having in mind this two tiers system, the wholesale is the central banks with the banks. That's almost like the reserve system that we know now. It's already digital when you look at the vast majority of the countries. And then you have this second level, that's the retail level, where even having a wallet of something that's issued by the central bank, they will be organized and implemented by banking institutions. So in the retail level, there is this second tier that's it, the commercial banks and the platforms, and then the non-financial actors. So we can see this here. That's a two-tier system. So in the top of the system, we have the central bank, which is the issuer of this money, is liability. So then we have another level where we see the big banks, the big central, the big public banks, and also the banks that are owned by these the same groups where these private platforms works, and we are talking about Alibaba from this Alipay, this private platform, and WeChat, which just an information right now. These two companies they are the main operators of these private platforms, where a lot of negotiations are done, and they are in charge of almost 100% of all the digital payments in China that are quite important. So that's a really important information here, that these institutions, they were the Central Bank of China has introduced them to the system. So they are on this second level of organizing, of implementers of the system. So I was just here. And then what's important, I think I have to go a little, but well, The Chinese central bank is in the top of the system, as you have seen. They issue and they organize the system. They have decided to use all the structure, financial structure that is already there. They know how important are the financial institutions that are already there for the working of the Chinese financial system. So they were incorporated. They can, even having, they will, so the banks, they will organize, they will be in charge of these wallets, of these digital currency wallets that are issued by the central bank. So what's important here? The wallets will work together with the banking deposits and also this private platforms. So the central bank will be on the top, or rather on the top of the system, but it will work together with the commercial banks that will be in charge of implementing all these wallets. But for example, you can go from a wallet to wallet operation. You can go to a e-wallet to a banking account deposit. You can go from this wallet, the e-wallet, to the private platform. So the central bank is using all the structure that they have now in order to launch this digital money. Important here is that there's a way to deal with anonymity. Quite important also, you see, from the customer point of view, using a private platform or using the central bank digital currency is not so different. You see, from the function of the system is quite different, but from the customer point of view, it's not so different. And then one thing that the central bank is telling us that's quite different from the central bank system is that all different from the private platforms. This money can be used on offline operations. Also quite important for the effects that we are going to highlight. This central bank digital currency, they do not pay interest rates. So just going to the end by having...
Just let you know, 2 more minutes.
Yes. Yes, I'm just going there. So just to our initial worry was how would this digital currency affect the banking system, mainly the credit system? What we see in China is a quite important worry from the central bank in order to work together with the system. So they have the perception of the centrality of the financial system and mainly the banking system. And so the design of the CBDC were decided having in mind this the keeping of the system. You see, also this design, the two tiers system, no interest rates bearing, and also all this loosely conversion between the state money, the digital money, and the deposit accounts shows how important how the Chinese central bank has tried to introduce or to keep the system working how it is closer how it is today. It doesn't mean that there will be no differences, but there is what we see in our research is that there is a worry also from not just for the Chinese central bank, but we see that in a clear way, having them in mind that they went further on the design of their digital currency. So that's it. Thank you very much for your attention. I was on my time. I don't know if in your time.
It was a very good presentation. Thank you very much, Anna. And again, for being there for us, waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning. So we are now opening the floors for questions. So if you can come close, if you don't want to come onto the stage, just come close to the mic so that Anna can hear you. Give your name and your affiliations and then your questions will come. Yes, anyone? Okay. I have a question for Rafael. Thank you for introducing a full picture of how Brazil and China relations evolve. And very interesting, you have mentioned that manufacturing is actually significant part of Chinese investment in Brazil after the 2010s. So I wanted to ask you, how are the industrial relations there, especially in projects that involve Chinese investments? Because sometimes this can be quite a controversial topic in other countries. And what are the positions of the trade unions? Do they welcome Chinese investment, or do they think that is a threat to us, or making worse working conditions and terms for them? So would like to know more about that if you have the information. And anyone have any questions? Yes, Karen?
I have a question to Rosa.
Just 1 second. Anna, can you hear Karen? Yeah, okay.
I would be happy if she can speak louder, please.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
can.
Okay, I want to know, will you characterize the Chinese system as a stable coin? And is the par completely one-to-one with the currency as it is elsewhere? I mean, as it functions, so it's simply the same thing, just in another form as the other currency, ordinary currency.
Anyone else? If not, then we will just these two questions. Oh, sorry, yes.
So should I go over there?
Yeah, if you come closer to the mic. Speak your name, your name.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sean Stars from King's College, London. I have a question for all three speakers. Alicia, so you had Wall Street ownership of Chinese SOEs, so BlackRock especially, and also Vanguard and so on. So I'm wondering, what are the implications you draw from that? Are you saying that there's increasing Wall Street control over Chinese SOEs? So that's the broader theoretical question. But second of all, I just want you need to specify, whether those are ownership of A shares or 8 shares, right? So you said that the BlackRock, for example, is like 0.3% of some of your firms, but it's actually higher than that, because that I'm pretty sure is the ownership of the shares that are listed in Shanghai. But of course, the shares are also listed in Hong Kong, and American ownership of those shares is much higher. So they need to go through each corporate annual report, because each Chinese SOE has a different proportion of shares that's listed in Shanghai and Hong Kong. But I think because I also looked at ownership structures, and I think Wall Street's ownership is actually quite a bit higher than your data. Rafael, I'm just wondering what geopolitical influence you find, or if there is any, between the different changes in government and Chinese investment. So Temer and Bolsonaro are much more pro-US, and Bolsonaro is even anti-communist, as you said. Did you see any difference in the nature of Chinese investment, or if they're worried, if the Chinese state was worried about this change in geopolitical orientation? And then with Lula just coming into power earlier this year, is there again, like, so you said there was a decline in 2022. Do you see that's going to rise because of maybe greater BRIC solidarity, or is it just completely profit motive, like, geopolitics are irrelevant? And just what are the internationalization implications of the e-CNY? Like, will this, if China broadly adopts the currency, would that make it? Oh, is it coming up? Can you still hear me?
Yeah, you can, yeah, Anna.
No.
Anna, can you hear Sean?
No, I wasn't able to understand. It's really not a good connection. I don't know if the connection
turned off.
Just shout into the screen.
Shout into that screen.
She understood what I said from here.
Can you maybe?
You see, I would be very happy if I could see you.
Okay.
I saw that you are in the front, but I was not able to see you.
So if China, very broadly adopts the electronic currency here, the CNY, do you think that would make it easier for China to internationalize its currency, especially in the context of potentially challenging the US dollar? Thank you.
Okay, I think so. I will give it to Rafael first, and then Alicia, and then Anna. Okay.
Do I go there?
Yeah. if you can- I mean, Rafael come first. Yes.
Okay, please.
Okay.
Sorry, your name is?
Chancellor?
Chancellor?
Yeah.
Chancellor.
Something like
Well, first of all, the research that we are making of the 10 big corporations, that big 10 Chinese corporations around the world, but especially in Latin America, but it is the same for other parts of the world, is in the database of the Wall Street Journal. You can see the companies, and then you can see the amount that they have investment, and also the shares. But the data is not only in the Wall Street, but also it is in a database that they have in Boston University. That's where we took all the amount of the investments of each one. And of course, you don't know if it is in the beginning of the year. For example, is it 2012? And if it was only the amount for that year, or it is the amount of the project. So we don't have that because it isn't more explained the data. So what we want to see, why BlackRock, Vanguard Group, and all these institutional investors are investing in these companies, it is because the return rate is very high. And especially if you see during the second decade, where the interest rates was almost zero, it was better to invest in these companies that they were growing around the world. So you have to understand what these institutional investors, what they are trying, they are going to invest where they will have a big profit. They are not seeing if it is China, if it is USA, if it is Ukraine or Brazil. They are going to invest where the profit is higher. So what we want to know is if there is a financialization process of these big, great companies. And the other thing is that for me, it was very useful to use the hot finance, this category that Polanyi used in the Great Transformation. And you can see how this, when I read the paragraph of Polanyi, is that it doesn't, even there is an agreement of this hot finance with the central banks. And of course, it is an agreement with the interest rate, and there's like an agreement of good friends. And even if they are in dispute right now, if it is China and USA are disputing or they are having conflicts, it doesn't matter. They are going to invest for they obtain high rate return. That's why. So when you ask me if the shares are in Hong Kong or in Shanghai stock market, no, it is. I don't know if we can know where are the shares. No, it is it is. I think it's the thing is that we began trying to see where do these companies, these corporations invest, but then we are finding more things and more things. So the hypothesis is changing. Thank you.
Sorry, Alicia. I think the colleague was asking, if I understand correctly, if you think, based on your preliminary findings, the investments by companies, Wall Street, big firms like BlackRock in Chinese state-owned enterprises? Does it mean, does it signify, in your view, a greater control by Wall Street?
Oh, no,
Thank you.
No.
That's the question.
no, of course not. They're institutional investors. They want the profit. No, but
They want
and
their share of the
that
profit,
share,
yeah.
no, because that shares is very little.
Yeah.
That shares that they have, if you see, they are very little. They have all around the companies,
Yeah.
but it is very little that shares that they have.
But the colleague was saying maybe that David heard you.
Oh, yes,
corrected.
I think, yes, I
He was
no.
saying, you know, in Hong Kong, maybe
No, no,
the
no, no, no.
actual country is much larger. That's what he's saying.
No.
It's very clear answer. So Rafael, next please.
So that's me, all right?
Rafael.
No problem. Let me check. First, about the industrial investments in Brazil, they are arriving two ways, with new plants, but they are also coming through the acquisitions of old companies. And there's a specific example. Ford, the current industry, they closed a plant in Bahia State in the northeast of Brazil, and now the BYD is implanting a new factory there. This is an example. Through acquisitions of old companies, Brazilian companies or multinational companies that were operating in Brazil. In the electro sector, is buying a license from the government to operate hydroelectric, solar power, wind powers, etc. About the union's view, they have a good view from that, because who watched the Professor Elias saying 3 days ago, he exposed the industrialization of Brazil from the 80s onwards. Brazil was Brazil was about to have 30% of the GDP in industry sector 30 or 4 years ago. And there were strong disindustrialization through the neoliberal shock therapy in the 80s and 90s. So when some companies are arriving with the industrial and which pays better salaries than the services or other sector of the economy, the trade union, the unions, they see as a good thing. And I can say that because I am a union leadership in my sector, of course, in the academic sector, but I'm a partner of a central union, so I can say this with a lot of knowledge about the process. The other question, let me share. Sorry, I also forgot your name. You just told your name.
The guy.
So thank you. Sorry again. The logical views of the governments of Brazil. As I show you, what Brazil is exporting for China, especially, is agriculture and primary sector. And there's a contradictory, because this sector, the owners of this sector in Brazil, they are probably the most reactionary people in Brazil, but they do business with China. So with these contradictions, they prevented Bolsonaro government to cut the lines or to cut the relation with China, because they're making a lot of money with that. So, we're only talk about the trade, the buying and selling things. But Bolsonaro government and also Temer's government, they prevent China they don't let Brazil come to Belt and Road Initiative. And that was a problem for China in South America, because when they are starting to put investments in the Belt and Road Initiative in South America between 2015 and 2016, happened two bad things for China, which was the changing of power in Argentina, when the former president Cristina Kirchner left the power and Maurício Macri assumed. And 1 year later, the coup in Brazil and Michel Temer assumed. So the Belt and Road Initiative was freezed in the two most important countries of South America because of political reasons. That was a problem. That in this specific case about the investments in Belt and Road Initiative, the logical view of Temer and after more even with Bolsonaro was a problem because the relations with US and this is one significant issue that happened. But the commerce, as Brazil is selling the agriculture sector of Brazil, they see the US as a competitor and not a partner. And that's why Bolsonaro wasn't able to cut the relations, especially because that the US agriculture sector is a strong competitor of Brazil agriculture sector. So it was a contradictory thing that the most reactionary people in Brazil preventing the government to cut the lines with the China. And that was, I think I answered all the, yes, the numbers you asked me, I thought they were in the presentation because I changed the presentation a few times because it was too long and then almost past the time. The investments of China in Brazil in this period from 2012 from 2022 were about $15 billion. And last year, specifically $4.8 billion. I think that's it.
15?
50 all the 11 years and 50. And last year 4.8.
Thank you, Anna.
Well, we'll start. Thank you for the two questions. I couldn't keep your names. I'm so sorry. So the first question. The first question, it's quite difficult to, you see, we have learned to do that on pandemics, to talk to no one, so seeing no one, but you see, I'm hearing you. So the first question, I wouldn't say, as I understood, I wouldn't say that the e-yuan is a stable coin. What I know about stable coins that they are private coins and they are linked to another type of assets. When you talk about CBDC, we are talking about an instrument that is issued by a central bank. And we are talking about the Chinese central bank on this case. So I wouldn't say that's a stable coin. It's a central bank currency, and that leads to a lot. And when we started the research, that was our first perception. So when we talk about creating a digital currency, we are just thinking about the substitution of the physical money. And when we see, when we see how the system works, how we do our operations, we as consumers, as families, we do electronic and right now digital all the time. And but when we think about creating a digital money, it's another way, because we're not just changing this method, the way that the transactions are done for the consumer. You have all behind the way that the whole system works. And as we know, how the monetary system works is quite important for monetary policy, is quite important for the banking system, it's quite important for how the economy works. So it can lead, the introduction of a digital currency can lead to great change in the way the system works. For example, I will give you an example. That was our first worry. We have technology right now for each one of us having an account into the central bank. So we could have our accounts in the banks and an account into the central bank. It would lead to a change on this two-tier system that works right now, and it's quite behind. It's the structure for the credit right now. So it's huge. It's depending on the design. It's huge, And I would say that this idea of one-to-one is the base of our system right now. We have the banking money, the private money that the bank create, and the state money. And what gives stability for the system is the possibility of exchanging one-to-one from private and state money all the time. So it's quite important to keep that one-to-one. Our point, having in mind the credit, we wouldn't expect that the central bank started giving credit for the economies. There are some defenders of that. We wouldn't expect that. But the changes are great, and it has to keep this one-to-one relation, and that doesn't mean that the system will not change a lot. So just getting to the point, I wouldn't say that is a stable coin, and a lot of changes can happen even having this one-to-one, but it should have one-to-one to guarantee the stability of the system. Otherwise, we would have different types of money with different types of importance. Okay, I'm not sure if I went to their question. For the second question, when you talk about CBDC, the literature in general highlights three very important impacts that the creation of a digital retail money would mean. That would be on monetary policy, that would be on banking system. In general, the discussion is on the role of intermediation of the banking system, and as I have said, we look in a different way. And also from these frontiers operations. And we're not doing this research on the trans-frontiers operations. But I would say that on this situation, we have different levels of thinking. Having in mind the technology that we have, that's already there, available right there, it could stimulate the renminbi to become a more important international currency. But I would say that the technology is important, but the main determinants are how the economy works. And what I have in mind is really a way that we are going to how the planet economy works, how all the forces, political forces work. We are not going to a system that's polarized. We are having in mind the discussion of Robert Gutmann. We are already going to a multipolar system. So we expect that as the Chinese economy is growing, the importance on the system is already the second biggest economy in the world, and maybe the first. What we see is that it's quite expected that its money, its currency gets more importance, and the technology allows that, but it's much more in charge. And then maybe I wouldn't say that the renminbi could replace dollars, quite different, but we should have in mind this multilateral system that's working right now. And I also will give you an example how things can go in a very simple way to bigger way. I had the other day I saw a headline on the news, on the TV news, that was that the you can already, you are already using the Brazilian digital means of payment that's maybe you have already heard about this, that speaks. It's already being used in Argentina, who has a very important problems with their economy and very important problems with their money. So they are already using their very domestic Brazilian mechanism. So when you talk about digital, you can have operations all over the world. So that would be the first. But going back to China, what I've been on my research, I've been seeing that's the main concern of the Chinese central bank is the domestic economy. But you are already putting the elements to have the renminbi or the electronic yuan with a bigger power in the whole system. And also the Chinese central bank is already going to some experience of interoperability under the BIS movement. So I would say that the technology can permit that, but I believe more on the economic factors to understand this movement of the Chinese or the international movement of the Chinese currency. But thank you for the questions.
Thank you, Anna. So I think we have a few minutes left. So yes. Come on, come up here, she can see you. You feel a bit lonely there.
Hi, hi, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you all for the very nice presentation. Yes, my question was for you, Ana Rosa, and I've been studying CBDC as well, but I wanted to know if what you found from your research about the pilot that China conducted in the last period. Yeah, what was the reception from the public, and if there are some ideas, some studies that can unveil something about monetary or fiscal policies, how CBDC can have an effect on that. I don't know if you found anything there. Thank you.
Sorry, what's your name?
Sorry, Samuele.
Samuel.
Yes, from Northumbria University.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No, then yeah, Anna, do you want to respond to that? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Samuel, for your question. I really didn't go further on this pilot. What I read is, first of all, this idea of pilots is quite related to the way that the Chinese authorities go. You see, I think that the idea of pilots is just much more experiencing and then guaranteeing a way to have a system that works better. So I would say that we have had a lot of, they are ongoing, so a lot of accounts, as I have seen, but as I have written also, and it's from newspapers, okay, especially some articles on Financial Times. What we see is that the use of the e-yuan is not going so large, so as broad as they were expecting. See, because you already have a system that works. It's private platforms, as you've been studying this, you know that it works, really work. And there's a lot of stimulus to the consumers use more, and the firms use more the e-yuan, there's a lot of stimulus like lotteries, and it gets people to there in order to maybe receive some award, but it doesn't guarantee that they go there. So what we've been reading is that the experience is not so bad as they would, even the authorities were expecting. Yes, I know that in some experiences, for example, I will not remember the province. You have already some local governments that are involved on the experience of the pilot, so you can pay your taxes already on the pilot model on e-CBDC. So it really can change how the system is operated. And as monetary policy, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't see effects right now from the pilots, but you can have very important change on that. But you see, as the Chinese central bank just decided not to pay interest on or have accounts on the wallets that bear interest rates. They are also looking not just to the deposits from the banking accounts that may use these paying interest rates in order to keep their space on the whole payment system, but also they had in mind the monetary policy as if you pay interest rates on this type of instrument, it will lead to problems on the use of short-term government bonds. So I haven't seen that. I should go, but you see, we've been looking closer to the effects on the banking system. That's our point.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Thank you. I think we are coming to the end of the session now. So thank you for coming. And thank you, especially to the three presenters for the brilliant presentations. We have our we have the next one is starting from 11:15, moving beyond capitalism and China in room 11. So we will see you there, hopefully, 11:15. Thank you.
It's upstairs.
No, it's actually here on the ground
Here.
floor. Yeah, 11, room 11. Thank you.
Thank you.
Get some rest after this now.
Yes, I will go back to bed.
Yes, certainly. Bye.
Bye.